Welcome to Blended Scotch Reviews number 8 for our second blended Scotch match. Today's competitors have previously been studied and reviewed. We have the famous Grouse and Teacher's Highland Cream. The rules. I'm looking for the whiskey that I would simply prefer 3 nights out of 5 between the two. But honestly, so far, these matches have been so close that maybe it just depends on how I'm feeling that particular day. These whiskeys are all priced reasonably close together. Most of them are 80 proof, though tonight that's not going to be the rule. I find them all delicious so far. In case of a tie, I can use price and availability as a tiebreaker. The one thing I'm doing that makes this extremely difficult is that in these first 2 matches at least, I'm pitting a more heavily peated whiskey against a whiskey that has almost no peat smoke in it. The competition is conducted in blacked out Glencairn glasses because sometimes I can tell the whiskeys apart by how they look. Part of the fun is I'm going to try to figure out which is which, but that doesn't affect the outcome. Now in our first mashup, we had Dewar's White Label versus Isle of Skye 8-year. And the Isle of Skye won that one. The Isle of Skye does have kind of a heavy dose of peat, and it was an 8-year-old, so it had some advantages there. Dewar's was no age statement, and some people say Dewar's has no peat. It actually has a very thin line of peat in it. You kind of have to search for it, but it's there. Then we did the single malt match between Aberfeldy 12, the major contributor to Dewar's, and Talisker Storm, because Talisker is long rumored to contribute to the Isle of Skye, but I didn't have any official confirmation of that. The Aberfeldy won over the heavily peated Talisker. So it was interesting that in the blended match, the peated one won, and in the single match, the peated one lost. So that's just how it goes. Now, these competitors tonight, the Glencairn glasses are labeled 1 and 2 on the bottom. The famous Grouse is glass number 1. And since 1979, this 80 proof blend has been the most popular whiskey in Scotland, which speaks volumes for it. This blend originated in Perth with a grocer, Matthew Gloag, in the mid-19th century. He and his sons came up with Gloag's Perth whiskey. But by 1896, the Gloag family changed the label to feature the Grouse, and in 1905 changed the name to the famous Grouse. The major contributors to this blend originally included Highland Park, the Macallan, and Glenrothes. The brand stayed in the family until the 1970s when a tragic accident and tax law combined to force the heirs to sell. And fortunately, Highland distillers bought the whiskey brand, but then 20 years later, they sold it to the Edrington Group, who still owns it today, I believe. And this is the only Scotch whiskey that I have actually heard radio advertisements for on my local radio station, WBAP, here in Fort Worth. Today's Grouse contains at least Highland Park, Macallan, and we think maybe Glenturret. Grouse, the home base for Grouse was Glenturret for a while. I've heard that's no longer the case, so who knows what they're using in there. The whiskey also was aged in sherry casks. It retails in Fort Worth for around $21 or $22 at the big box stores. I paid $27 for mine because I went to a small store that a friend owned in Central Texas. On the palate, it's malty, sweet, honey, some fruit, some spiciness, and really this is one of the sweetest Scotch whiskeys I've tried. It's very drinkable. I previously scored this as an 86 and drinkability an A-. Will I buy another bottle of famous Grouse? This is my second bottle, and you can see that it is getting low. So yes, I would say this is one I would always be interested in having. I would definitely buy it again. Now, whiskey number 2, Teacher's Highland Cream. In 1830, Glasgow, another grocer, there's a theme there, William Teacher obtained a license to sell whiskey by the glass from his grocery store. By 1860, he was experimenting with and selling his own blends. And by 1876, after his death, his sons established the brand William Teachers and Sons Limited. In 1898, they built a distillery called the Ardmore. And in 1960, Teacher's family bought the Glendronach distillery. In the 1980s, they were considered the second most popular whiskey in the UK for a while, behind famous Grouse. Today, they are owned by Suntory and are the 17th most popular Scotch in the world, according to one list I saw. Lists vary depending on who makes the list. This whiskey is comprised of about 45% single malt, so that's quite high for a blend. It uses the Ardmore, but Laphroaig is a sister distillery owned by Suntory, so who knows? It's aged in ex-Jim Beam barrels, again owned by Suntory, so that makes sense. And it comes in at 86 proof. This whiskey is not as easy to find as the Grouse. Goody Goody seems to be the only place that has had it, but even they are out the last time I checked. I last paid $18.99 for this bottle, and this is my second bottle. I previously scored this whiskey an 82, but drinkability was an A. So obviously I think I'm planning on buying another bottle because this one's getting low. Now on to the competition. Oh, and I might say there are books available. Here is a book about teachers, A Teacher's Tale, and here's a book about the famous Grouse. So absolutely, if you love to study whiskey like I do, those books are available. All right, we're going to do this competition. And again, it is blind. I don't know which whiskey. Well, Teachers is in number 2 and Grouse is in number 1. But I don't know which is which in these two glasses. I will start by nosing the one on my left. And I'm getting some maltiness and a little bit of peat, so I'm wondering if this is Teachers. All right, we'll try the one on the right. Really not getting anything on the one on the right. So what that means is I will start drinking the one on the right, since it seems to have the least going on. I tend to do that so that the stronger one doesn't wreck my palate for the weaker one. So here we go. I'll say that on the nose, the one on the left, 1. So now let's go to the taste. Whoa. I think the one on my right is the Teachers. That is a good dose of peat. Yeah. A little bit of maltiness going on there, but a lot of peat. A little bit of a appropriate spiciness there. That is very good. But yeah, there's peat there from start to finish. So I'm going to suggest that the one on the right is probably the Teachers. It's interesting, though, that one on the left had the stronger nose, and I even smelled some peat in it. People say, well, the famous grouse doesn't have any peat. Keep in mind, it's got Highland Park in there. Now, Highland Park's from the Orkneys, and Highland peat is different from Isla peat. So there is some peat in famous grouse. You have to, when I paired this with the Highland Park, that's when I really discovered, oh yeah, there's a thin line of peat going throughout famous grouse. Absolutely. All right, let me rinse my mouth out again. I mean, that peat on that one it's lingering. It's got a long finish, an appropriate little burn there. Mouthfeel is good. So all of that was excellent, but that can wreck a non-peated whiskey following. So what that did, and I'll definitely say that's a famous grouse, is that the super sweetness that is common with famous grouse was tamped down because of the peat of the first whiskey, but the peat comes out a little bit more. And so here's a case of the first whiskey pretty much wrecked the second whiskey, even though I rinsed my mouth out. So, that's almost not fair, but things like that happen. So the Teachers is the one on the right, and I would say that one definitely wins the day as far as taste, mouthfeel, burn, finish, all of it. The one on the right seems to really dominate, which is unfortunate. But it really robbed the famous grouse of its key flavors. That's almost not fair, but it is what it is. All right, which is which? The one on the left should be number 1, and it in fact is. The one on the right is number 2. Teachers is the winner by a landslide. But in some ways, that's kind of just not fair. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to account for that. Here's the problem, is that if you're doing peated versus non-peated, that can happen, because peated whiskeys are so dominant that it'll just wreck your palate for anything else after that. It's just been kind of my experience. So maybe I should rethink putting peated whiskeys against non-peated. I had the same problem when in my rye tournaments that I'm doing also, is that the Texas rye tournament, is that the ryes that have a heavy dose of the Texas funk just overwhelm the ryes that don't have the Texas funk. They're both good, but if you compare the heavy funk of a Texas rye with a Texas rye that doesn't have it, it just overwhelms it. And so it's almost like comparing apples and oranges. Well, which one do you like better? Well, I like both. Okay, check me on which day of the week do I prefer the apple to the orange. And that's what I'm finding here in the blended Scotch tournament. So today it is Teachers, without a doubt. But it's funny because with the single malt, Aberfeldy beat Talisker. So I'm not sure. You know, I don't remember now. Did I sample the Aberfeldy first and then the Talisker? See, that's almost how you have to do it. And then it wouldn't be blind. But, all right. So next up on blended Scotch reviews, it will be the single malt match between Highland Park that feeds into Famous Grouse and the Ardmore. So that will be two peated whiskeys. Highland Park has got a Highland peat. The Ardmore also Highland, but it's a little bit more peatier, I think. So that'll be a good, yeah, that'll be a good competition there. So that's what we'll do next on blended Scotch reviews. And keep in mind that as we progress through my list of about 16, maybe 18 blended Scotches, I've got two more editions of Grouse coming up. I've got the Famous Grouse Ruby Cask and the Famous Grouse Smoky Black. So those two are coming up. So that'll be 3 different Grouses. Grouses. All right. Well, this is Stab the Dragon for Blended Scotch Reviews out here.